What's up, y'all? It's Taty and welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to talk to you guys today. This topic has been one that's like so overdue in my opinion, because I just feel like, girl, I've been in therapy for a minute and so I've learned a lot along the way, and I would never want to gatekeep that. I feel like the stigma on therapy is like so counterproductive. It's like, oh, why would I sit down and tell some stranger my problems? You let a stranger figure out your problem when you go to the physical doctor, when you get a checkup, if you ever had to go to the hospital, if you ever had to do any of that, you're letting a stranger figure out your problems. So I don't really know the difference between that and going to a therapist so that the therapist can help you figure out your problems the same way. I think people just have such an aversion to like emotional vulnerability. People will get in a gown, let the doctor check them, everything's fine physically. Once a doctor has to check on them emotionally, it's like, whoop, full stop. I don't want to do it anymore. And I just feel like we need to change that narrative. Now that I just went on this whole rant, child. So let's just get into this. But first, if you've not subscribed to the channel yet, what are you doing? We're going to give you a second to do so. Did you do it? Good. Now you can watch the video, and welcome to the family. That is my old intro. For those of y'all who have been begging for it, I brought it back. Let's see if she stays. Now let's really get into this. Where do I want to begin? I took notes for this, okay? I made a list, y'all, because I got things I want to hit on. So we got different rooms about the past, the present, the future. We're going to touch all of them. Okay, I want to start with this one because I think it would just allow everything else to kind of flow. Something very specific to those of us who worry about the future, or who have anxiety, or think that the past will repeat itself in the future. X, Y, and Z. A quote that I literally have as a reminder on my phone every day at 12 p.m. PST, okay? A reminder that I wrote down from therapy is, don't borrow grief from the future. What do we mean by that? This is just what it is. There's going to be some type of grief in the future about whatever it is. If it's career, if it's relationship, if it's whatever it is, in whatever room of life, there's going to be something that's going to happen in the future that will upset me, right? It is what it is, right? That's already written, and I think accepting that first is the first step, because when we are so worried about the future, it's almost like this ego thing of like, maybe I can change it, like a thing of, if I see it coming now, maybe I can change it. But it's like being focused on a future event that may never even happen. And so being so focused on the future, you're missing the present. And because you're missing the present, you might inadvertently, you might be setting yourself up for that to happen in the future. You know what I mean? So that's one. But two, if something is gonna happen in the future and I'm gonna have to experience the sadness and stuff then, why am I borrowing that now? It's putting myself through the sadness before the sadness even happens, if it ever happens. Don't borrow the grief from the future. Let things naturally unfold, and if the time is supposed to come that you have to feel that, then you will. That's something big that I learned from therapy, of just like, same feelings that you're so worried about avoiding in the future, because you're so worried about them, you're feeling them now. Sometimes when we live in that, right, when we live in the feeling of, oh my gosh, like, I just don't know if I'm gonna succeed in this career, I just don't think I am, like, I just need to be prepared for that because da-da-da-da-da. You're almost manifesting that for yourself because you're living in that energy, you're living in that space. Your body has already accepted that as your fate. It's just really important to remember the future is what the future is. I can't focus on next year, I can't focus on that because I'll miss today worrying about tomorrow. When you're so focused on tomorrow, it's almost like the arrogance of feeling like tomorrow is always promised to everybody. You know what I mean? You're not here to stress about the uncertain future. You're here to enjoy the certain present. Thinking and living in a realm that hasn't happened yet, in a realm that's imaginary. Sometimes when I start living in my head instead of my body, I literally have to like pinch myself, like wherever I'm at, whatever I'm doing, I'll pinch myself just a little bit, just to like remind myself like, ooh, I'm real, this is my body, this is what's present right now, because I feel this little bit of like ouch, and it brings me back out of my mind into my body, which brings me back into the present. The mind tends to run into the future or run into the past. So sometimes you gotta stick with the body, because the body is the only thing in the present, right? Your body was in places in the past and will more than likely be in places in the future, but it is in the present. That is fact. That is certain. Don't let your mind run into time periods that truly in this moment don't exist. Do not borrow grief from the future And don't borrow it from the past either, because the past already felt it for you. Why keep going back and being like, let me have another piece of that, let me feel it with you, let me share it with you? The past took it for you, the past experienced it, so why borrow it in the present? Unless, my next point, you're borrowing it in order to reflect, grow, and leave it. That is the only time to borrow it. Not when you're trying to fulfill the negative thoughts you have about yourself. So let's say maybe you feel insecure and you're like, oh, I'm not pretty or whatever. You think back to a moment where maybe somebody told you that, maybe a boy made you feel that way, whatever it is, you think back to be like, see, that's why I'm not pretty. Pump the brakes. If you're reaching and borrowing from the past to do that, you're borrowing from the past to live there. It's like, it might feel safer for you to live in the past than to take the leap of being in the present, because the present feels unknown. Every second that comes next, we don't know what happens. If you're borrowing from the past to confirm sad things about yourself, mean things about yourself, say in things that may feel comfortable because you've been feeling them for so long, your body's been dwelling in it for so long, we have to do a better job at not doing that. The only way you should be borrowing from the past is to say, let's say the same scenario, let's say you're feeling insecure, right? Now here's a healthy way to borrow from the past. I'm feeling insecure. Why? I saw this person, or I looked at myself in the mirror and I felt insecure about myself. Okay, why? What is it that you saw about yourself in the mirror that you didn't like? What is it that you saw in this other person that you feel you don't have? Answer those questions. Why do I feel like me lacking that means I'm less than? Now we borrow from the past. Now you ask yourself, when's the first time I felt like this about myself? When's the first time I compared myself and felt like I was lacking this? Go back in your arsenal. Maybe you were 8, maybe you were 6, maybe you were 10, whatever it was. Oh, it was when the girls at school said this to me. It was when I saw this in a movie. It was when whatever. We borrow from that and we rewrite it. So now, instead of you borrowing from the past and bringing it up and saying, see, this is why I am not pretty because these girls told me in the past. You bring it up and you say, I feel not pretty in this moment because these girls told me in the past. And because I wasn't able to process that, I took that as fact. Now, I'm rewriting that narrative, and just because they told me that doesn't mean it's true. I can tell you the sky is red. That doesn't mean it's true, right? We could both be looking at a blue sky and I could say it's red just because I feel like it. So you rewrite it. You rewrite it and say, maybe those girls felt sad about themselves, so they put that on me. But I won't allow them to write my story any longer because I don't like feeling like this about myself. I'm worthy, I'm in the present, and I'm gonna enjoy myself. That's how you rewrite the past. And now we leave it, and now you'll probably borrow from it less often because you've rewritten it, so it will feel less significant as a moment in your past because it helped you write your present. Does that make sense? Now, building off of that, a lot of the things in our past that we look at that like shaped us, that upset us, that were traumatizing, have to do with other people. Not always, but a lot of times. Family, friends, school, bullies, boys. Sometimes our past has to do with other people and we hold on to these versions of not only ourselves at that time, but those people. And we carry that with us because it hurt us, right? Something we have to remember, people typically treat you as well as they can treat themselves. People can only meet you as far as they've met themselves. Something that's helped me heal from lost friendships, from trauma in my past that have to do with other people, empathy, and that can be hard. I know it's giving like, girl, what? I'm not giving empathy to the villain. I understand that. But let me give you another scenario. The villain in your story, right? You might be the villain in theirs. Gag. I know. It might be like, girl, who, how, where, never gay villain. They're the villain. If I'm the villain in their story, they're lying, right? That's because as people, sometimes we don't understand that perspective is everything. Do y'all remember when that blue and black dress, see, I'm saying blue and black. Do y'all remember when that blue and black / white and gold dress, if I can find it, I'll put it up here, was going viral? And it was like this whole thing on the internet of like, it's blue and black. No, it's white and gold. Who's to say either? Obviously there's an answer, but perspective, people's eyes are different. So people's perspectives are different because of their trauma, because of upbringing, because of all of these things. People's perspectives are different. Mine is gonna be different than yours. You could think, no, me and Taty are aligned on everything. We might be, but because I have a different pair of eyes and a different body than you do, we'll always see things a little differently. A little. Me and you could be looking at the same object, a big blue square, could be right next to each other, but because you're standing next to me, you're seeing it from a slightly different angle than I am, but we're both still looking at this square, right? I think that's something that I've really had to invoke in my life, because you can hold on to a lot of trauma and be like, how could she see it that way? How could da-da-da-da-da? How could I be the villain in their story? How could? Because we're both looking at the same square from different angles, and that's okay. But that's something big that I learned from therapy. That's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible. And that's an important mission, because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online and it's remote. And just by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's super easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist, and there's a link in my description at betterhelp.com/Taty. Now, clicking that link does support this channel, but it also gets you 10% off your first month to see if BetterHelp can connect you with a therapist that's right for you. And like I've told y'all before, finding a therapist is a little bit like dating. So if you don't really vibe with your therapist, you can switch out at any time without having to worry about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. So clearly from this video, y'all can tell therapy has given me so much insight on the world, others, and myself. So if you're looking for a little bit of extra help on your journey, I encourage you to consider BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/Taty. Thank you, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. Now let's get back into the video. Like, for example, some friendships in my life, right? Like as a younger girl, I was quick to be like, no, I don't want to be friends with her no more, right? Because growing up, I wouldn't say that my close friend group was large. So I think I take friendship like really, really serious. And so when I would feel disappointed by my friend for whatever reason, I just would done with it, right? And I thought that was the healthy thing to do. I'm thinking, well, I don't drag friendships out, I don't this and that. If it's not giving, then whatever, we just cut it and that's fine. It's not beef, it's not nothing, but like, we don't have to be friends. As I got older, I realized like that's not okay, because people are gonna fall short sometimes and you have to allow them to grow. Now that doesn't mean you don't have boundaries. I still have very tight boundaries, and that would never change. But what did change is allowing myself to invoke the empathy of, hold on, maybe they just saw it from a different perspective. Hold on, they might have been going through something themselves and they were only treating me as good as they could treat themselves in that moment. Even if I didn't make the decision to rekindle the friendship, I may have made the decision to forgive. And that is so big. I forgive my bullies in school. I forgive old friends, old people. Like, I forgive everyone because they were only able to meet me where they were at, and I was only able to meet them where I was at. In hindsight, maybe I would have invoked more of that empathy sooner. In hindsight, maybe I would have been a little bit more open to conversation. But at the time, once I was hurt, I shut off. And so now I think, you know, that's unhealthy to do. Point is, when you look at your past and you say, oh, this person hurt me, and then this person hurt me, and then these people hurt me, try to think about it from, these people were hurting themselves. And so when that happens, they're kind of just spewing it everywhere, and that doesn't make me any less worthy of love, of friendship, of family, of whatever it is. That just means for whatever reason they weren't feeling worthy. Sometimes people don't even feel worthy of you, and so in order to combat that feeling, this could be relationships, friends, family, sometimes people don't feel worthy of you, and so in order to combat that feeling for themselves, because that doesn't feel good, they try to bring you down to say, well, now I'm worthy of you. Well, maybe you're not worthy of me. All these things that like humans do to protect the ego, to defend themselves, because the ego, oh child, the ego runs the world. People can only meet you as far as they've done the work on their ego. People are always going through their own thing. And so I think in healing myself, looking back and forgiving people and saying, honestly, oh my gosh, you were probably going through so much for this to have happened between us, or for you to have treated me this way. And that's with everybody. That's also understanding that your parents, your aunts, your grandparents, your sisters, your brothers, they are people first. I think people always forget, like, how could you do this to me as a sister? How could you treat me like that as a mom? Forgetting though that before she was your mom, she was a young girl, just like you are, trying to figure it out in the world. And she had to figure it out with her mom and her mom and her mom. Like, People are themselves before they are something to you. And so I think that also helps you forgive people, because it's like, oh, I'm forgetting you're your own person before you're a family member to me, before you're a friend to me, before you're a partner to me. You're you first, with your own story and your own trauma and your own generations, and then you're somebody to me. So getting through all of that before you could be somebody to me is probably really hard, because for you, getting through all of who you are before you can be something to somebody else is also hard, whether you're able to see that or not. I think sometimes it's hard to see that, because it's like, no, I'm always a great friend to everybody. Have you ever considered that maybe that is also from trauma? Just throwing it out there, because sometimes people are like, no, I'm great to everybody. You may have some people-pleasing tendencies. That might be why. You might be such a great friend, a great sister, a great this, a great student, a great that. You may be a people pleaser for whatever reason. You may have fears of what happens if you say no to your friend. You may have fears of being alone, and so you might be a hyper perfectionist of being a friend, being a sister, being a girlfriend, being a daughter. You may be a hyper perfectionist in that way because you're scared that if you fall, will they abandon you? You're scared that if you fall, what does that say about you? You're scared to not be perfect. You're a people pleaser. It could be all of those reasons. So I think it's important to do the self-reflection and not only forgive everyone else that I feel harmed me, I hope that they forgive me if they feel that I wasn't there for them in some way. Although in my mind, I'm like, they cannot feel like that. They might. In their perspective, from where they're standing looking at the same square, it may feel like that. It may look like that to them. And so for them, you want to say, not only do you forgive everybody else, you hope that they forgive you for any time that you may have fallen short. And beyond that, you hope for healing, not only for them, but for you. And if that healing one day brings you around to these people and you can heal what this thing is together, great. If not, great. You healed it, you hope they heal it, and you move forward because you don't live in your past, because the present is beautiful. Does that make sense? Now, I'm gonna say something else that's gonna kind of sound like, well, girl, isn't that living in the past? No. Something that people don't understand is they think that as we get older, we're just always the age that we are now, right? So if you're 20, it's like, well, I'm 20 right now, and that's it. This is my 20-year-old version, and da-da-da-da-da. Fine, yes, true. But there's also a 6-year-old you somewhere in there. There's a 12-year-old you somewhere in there, because these versions of us are kind of like building blocks to who we become. And so, especially because we typically as people have like a lot of unhealed trauma along the way, we have a lot of unhealed versions in us along the way, right? The body stores a lot of trauma, and so you're probably carrying different versions of you in different areas of your body. When somebody pisses you off and you get that feeling of like anger come up, you get that feeling of like you're acting out. Like, think about the last time you really got angry, or you really lashed out, or you were really hurt by something, right? You think, well, that's my 20-year-old self, like that's me right now being angry. It's probably not. Probably your little girl self. It's probably your little 6-year-old self that's inside of you that is either angry. So if the last time you were really upset, if you were angry and you lashed out, it's probably little 6-year-old you trying to vindicate herself, trying to protect herself from a perceived bully, trying to make a voice for herself because she used to feel unheard. So although you are talking out your 20-year-old physical body, emotionally, it might be 6-year-old you, because your vocabulary is developed, right? You may be cursing, or you may be yelling louder, your voice might be a little deeper, or you might be saying other things, but underneath it, your little 6-year-old self might be yelling, hear me, see me, I'm enough, stop bullying me. Your little 6-year-old self might be yelling those things out, and you're just saying it differently because your outer is more of an adult, but you're still carrying her in here. Or maybe you were crying and you were really upset. Although you think it's your 20-year-old self or your 30-year-old self or whatever it is, crying and saying, oh my gosh, my version right now is so sad. It might be your little girl self. It might be your little 12-year-old self that is hurting and sad because she doesn't know how to process that. It might be her hurting and sad because she feels disappointed, or she feels less than, or she feels whatever. And so you're crying with her almost. You're kind of in a union together. And so a big thing in my own journey has also been allowing myself to become a parent to myself. And as you get older, I think you realize like, oh, even if you had parental figures in your life, eventually you have to learn how to become a parent for yourself, because your little self is always going to need some type of nurturing. Your 6-year-old version is somewhere in here, your 12-year-old is somewhere in here. Those are the building blocks of what makes you. That's what makes me Taty. And so sometimes when I'm feeling things, I just have to nurture little Taty. Sometimes I just have to go like this, and I have to hold myself and close my eyes, and I might be crying, and I might be like, it's okay. It's okay. I have you. It's okay. Let's talk about it. And talk to myself, journal with myself, whatever it is, and make her feel valid. Think about it like kids that are like, oh my God, it's monsters under the bed, it's monsters under the bed. You as an adult are neglecting your little girl self when she thinks there's monsters under the bed. It's anxiety about the future, if she's thinking about the past, if it's whatever. She's just feeling scared. She's feeling sad. She's feeling whatever. Stop abandoning her when she feels that, because you as an adults, we're easy to abandon each other, right? So we're very easy to abandon ourselves. Think about, like, you know, if you're like walking down the street and you smell a certain smell, like it could be oranges, right? If something happened when you were 16 and the smell of oranges was around, you at 20, 25, 30, 35, whatever you are right now, if you smell that again, the body remembers and keeps score of that. And so when the body sniffs it again, 16-year-old you might pop up. You don't know that because you're like, I'm 30, I'm 45, I'm this, I'm that. So no, that's me now. But really, it's not. It's 16-year-old you, and she took the surface. And now she's traumatized. She's sensitive, she might be crying, she might be angry, she's triggered in whatever way. Nurture her. Whatever she needed at 16, when that event with the smell of oranges was happening, give it to yourself now. You have an opportunity every day to give yourself when you were not given, when you needed it most, from yourself, from parents, from family, from friends, from relationships, whatever it is. You have that opportunity. Most of all, remember, progress is not linear. So just because you've made all these steps in your confidence journey per se, and then you have an insecure day, that's okay. You're a human, and it's not linear, and you making progress at all is amazing. Progress sometimes is being able to have a bad day, and how do you handle it better than you did in the past? Progress is also sometimes having a bad day and not handling it well and forgiving yourself for it and continuing to push forward. Progress is not just a straight line to the top. It can look like this, it can look like this. It's your journey, so make it yours. Forgive yourself, okay? Alright y'all, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed what I've learned in therapy. If y'all want a part 2, let me know. Make sure you guys comment down below so we can have a conversation, and I'll see you on my next one.